Okay, so we've talked about implementation at Ipswich with Kainos and the product being Kainos Evolve. So what is Kainos Evolve for those who don't know? For the Evolve solution, we see three main aspects. On the left-hand side, we have the initial capture of that information, and that information could be coming from scanned items. I'll just bring up my little tool to see if you can. Yep, so scanning of your various items. It could also include electronic document capture as well. So this is where we would automatically take on items. So for example, emails from your Exchange server, documents from your shared folders, which most organizations have quite a proliferation of. Or we can take items directly from your hospital system. So for example, when Ipswich create a new patient within their PAN system, we would automatically take that demographic information on. We would create a new section for filing for that patient. It could also be radiology results, pathology results, or any medical devices as well. And the idea is that Evolve becomes an aggregation of all the patient information that you would typically have printed out and put onto a patient case note. We can take it all online automatically without interaction from the patient or interaction from the users. Once we have it in the system, then we're on to managing that information. And so we've got electronic document management, all about the appropriate retention and appropriate security and sharing of that information. Evolve includes business process management, so the ability to actually create workflow processes. So for example, a discharge process where we send a message down to the pharmacy saying, okay, please arrange medications. Electronic forms. Electronic forms is one area that a trust can really start to derive a lot of benefit from an electronic system like Evolve. So this is where a trust is given the tools to actually create their own forms for their own processes. Security being an obvious one, the appropriate sharing of information, and appropriate restriction as well. So for example, break glass functionality, so that if we have a VIP or a member of staff, we can put additional layers of security on so that when a user comes to access that patient record, they must actually say, well, why are they treating it? Why are they wanting to access this information before it's presented to them? All backed up by full auditing procedures as well. So we know who has accessed a patient record. If it's a VIP, we can maybe send a message to the Caldicott Guardian saying a member of staff has accessed the record and here's why they have done it. And so once we have captured it and we're actively managing it, how do we present it back to the user? Well, searching, the ability to search for a patient record, the ability to search within a patient record for critical information. So it's trying to drink the ocean of that big patient case note, trying to focus in on the information that means the most to you and makes the most sense to you. We've then got our clinical records front end, the screenshots that Sarah shared with us earlier on, the ability to open up a case note online, to open up a tab within that case note, to bring up a document with rich thumbnails, the ability to restructure information within that case note. When you install Evolve, the license also includes the rights to use it for corporate records information, so within the Human Resources Department or facilities or finance or whatever, the ability to save documentation in, the ability to save emails in. Tight integration with Microsoft Office products is a very key facet to that, so the ability to just drag and drop an email from Microsoft Outlook, for example. This makes it a lot easier for all of the administrative and supporting services. So, for example, a medical secretary can bring up a patient within Evolve, hit a button to say, I'd like to create a new letter to the GP. We'll use templates to specify the content of that letter. And when she hits save in Microsoft Word, it's automatically saved back onto the right patient, tagged with the date, the episode of care, for example, as well. So taking a lot of the quite regular, relatively boring stuff away from them so that they can focus on actually typing the bits of the letter that actually matter the most. And then also the integration with existing applications. So the use of single sign-on, the use of context management to start hooking together all of the various applications within that organization. Also hooking into, for example, an electronic patient record, so that alongside all of the information within the EPR, you also get to see all of the information that would have been held on the patient case note traditionally. So let's look at a few of these facets. And the first one is scanning. And when Sarah was talking about scanning, she was talking about really two types of scanning. The back scanning of the legacy case note and the forward scanning going forward for any new information that's created during a clinic, during an inpatient stay, for example. So with backscanning, doing is we're replacing the traditional pull lists that you would have had for your clinics with lists that are pull and scan into the system. And so a user within a clinic setting simply accesses the information online. Once that information has been pulled and scanned in, we could then potentially flag within the PAS system to say, well, actually this information is no longer available as a physical case note. You'll find it within Evolve. And where appropriate links exist and appropriate capability exists within the PAS, we could also give the option to maybe place a button into that to say, well, okay, if I'm within the PAS, let's have a button that says, show me this information within the Evolve EDM platform. And so for the user, it becomes very quick and simple and not having to constantly search for patients. We can start tying the systems together to give a much more fluid experience from a user interaction perspective. When it comes to scanning, there are decisions to be made as to how much effort is actually placed at the scanning preparation stage. And it's really a cost versus benefit equation. Do we scan everything in as what I call just a big lump of information? So not putting the effort into actually saying, well, this is a piece of correspondence, this is a report. This might be applicable for a patient that you haven't seen in 7 years. And so you maybe make the decision, well, let's not put a lot of effort in at the start. If a patient then does present at a clinic, Evolve does allow very sophisticated ways for you to be able to restructure that patient record. So, for example, to be able to pull out the pages that are consent forms and create a new document just containing consent forms. Or you could go for what I call a tab-based lump, where we take all of the correspondence out of the correspondence tab and scan that in as one document. And so you've now got a document for correspondence, legacy reports, etc. Or a chronological lump within the tabs. So here's all of the information here are all the correspondence for the last year. And then here's all of the legacy correspondence that for more than a year ago. So starting to introduce a little bit more granularity. And again, yes, the ability to restructure post-scanning gives you the option as to how much or how little effort you actually put into the restructuring and scanning preparation stage. The preparation stage can be challenging. So if you think about the length of time that a patient case note can stay around, many years ago there was maybe poor quality paper used that's now starting to disintegrate for somebody who has an awful lot of information, so maybe a renal patient, they could have volumes and volumes of it. And so the challenge is to ensure that that is presented in its best possible format online with the clearest possible scan. And so we would always recommend the use of, for example, virtual rescan functionality, where we use software to deskew the page to make sure that's nice and straight, take out any noise, remove hole punches, etc. In other words, maximize the clarity of the image to make sure this is as good as we can possibly get for the user, but whilst remaining that absolutely essential legal admissibility, so that when if we have to go to court, we can stand over to say this is a completely accurate representation of what was in that patient case note at the start. For forward scanning, we're very conscious that paper has been around for a long time for a reason. It's a great way of actually capturing information. And so what we don't necessarily do is on day one, we don't come in and take all of the paper out of the clinics or all of the paper out of the organization, because that would be very disruptive. But what we can do on a forward scanning basis is we can retain paper for a short while. So for example, within a clinic, we can retain paper, allow the clinician within the clinic to write on the paper, creating a small temporary folder for that clinic encounter. But as soon as that clinic is over for the day, all of the paper that's generated for that clinic goes down to the central scanning team, is scanned and uploaded onto the patient record. So paper simply becomes, in this case, a recording mechanism. It's no longer a storage mechanism at all. And when we're forward scanning, it's done at a much higher level of granularity than would be typically done for a back scanning operation. So we would scan at the document level. We would add additional document level metadata as well. So another quick poll. In terms of scanning, what is your preferred mechanism for scanning? Is it the use of an in-house team for scanning, or would it be an outsourced activity that you would bring in an external agency for? or you haven't given any thought at this point. Okay, and if we close that off, let's have a look at the results. Yep, so a lot of you are undecided at this point and are open to the various options. 35% of you would be looking at something very similar to what was done with Ipswich, where we actually implement an in-house scanning operation. And 47% of you haven't given any thought yet. I suppose the thing that I should actually mention is that it doesn't matter how granular or how lumpy, for the use of a better term, the approach that you use to scanning. Everything is still scanned into the patient record. It's just how much additional work you want to put into the preparation. Do you do it at a document level or as a less granular approach?